Hi, Roy here. I thought I'd pop into Edge Hill University, my old stamping ground, to meet up with Emma Butler,
Well,
who is a Austenite who is doing a PhD on a Austen-related topic. So this being the first day of Jane Austen July, I thought it'd be good to have a chat about Jane Austen type
that's
stuff.
clever.
Yeah, so is that a fair introduction? Have you always been a Austen
I'd
fan?
say so. I my first introduction to Austen was probably the kind of at Christmas. They often have like the adaptations on. I think the first one I watched was the Gwyneth Paltrow Emma at Christmas. And in my second year of my undergrad, which is probably about 6 years ago now, I did a Jane Austen module, which got me fully into the books. So since then, I've been quite interested. I did my undergraduate dissertation on Jane Austen. I did my master's dissertation on Jane Austen, and now a PhD. So I think for a good 6 years, I'm safe to say I've been a big Austen fan.
Right, yeah. I mean, one thing I wanted to ask was, if you like something, is there a danger that studying it in depth kind of
Mm,
takes it apart? So you
yeah.
see the inner workings and maybe it spoils it.
I think there's an element of that. I think definitely reading a lot of like critical theory and things like that around it can help you see the books in different ways, but they can also make you feel kind of a little bit burned out
Mm,
sometimes. I like to call my PhD my secret Austen PhD because it's not officially on Jane Austen, it's about the seaside in the long 19th century, but each chapter has got a fair chunk dedicated to Jane Austen books. The first one, chapter being Sanditon and Persuasion, the second being looking at a bit more about Sanditon again, and a little tiny bit of Mansfield Park. Because my first chapter is about health, and my second chapter is about class and economics, and then my third chapter, which I haven't even kind of started yet,
mm.
I'll be looking at Pride and Prejudice and kind of how the seaside can be sort of gothic and precarious in kind of social ways. So I'm thinking about like
Yeah.
Mr. Wickham running off with Lydia at the seaside, for example. But no, I do feel like it's nice watching the period dramas. It's nice watching kind of adaptations. You can kind of laugh because they're a bit silly sometimes. They're not always like book accurate with the
Mm.
screen. I think in the Netflix Persuasion gets a bit strange, but it's enjoyable even though it's not like wholly book accurate.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, I think a nice balance definitely helps. Even though I am a very big Austen nerd, it's the
So you
t-shirts.
can still enjoy an adaptation, and you're not
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah.
that word is slightly
Mm.
wrong.
At times it does feel like that. I think the recent, I'm trying to think of it, Miss Austen, the one with Jill Hornby's book it was based on, was very good because it took some of the letters
Oh, right.
that Austen wrote to her sister and her sister wrote to her. And I would admit I cried at the last episode because the text was literally taken from the letters, and I was like, it was so good and so emotional. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard good things about
Mm.
the letters, because one of the Jane Austen July prompts is read something by Jane Austen that isn't one
Mm.
of the
Yeah.
main novels, which could be the unfinished books, which obviously you're doing that as well.
Mm.
But the letters, they sound like very
Yeah,
rich
interesting.
source of
Some of
sort
them
of
are quite
insight
funny as
into.
well. She's quite a little bit mean in some of them, which is quite funny.
Right. Oh, nice. So this just forgetting about Jane Austen specifically, then, what's this seaside angle you're looking at?
Yeah. So my argument of my PhD is how the seaside is a liminal space within the 19th century, calling liminal space kind of a space where boundaries are blurred, where things aren't fixed. There's kind of a slippage in a way. Looking at health, for example, the kind of main aspect of the 19th century in people who are ill going often get called invalids, thinking of like Mrs. Bennet, who moaned about her nerves, wants to go to Brighton for her nerves, for example. In the unfinished Sanditon, there's a lot of the Parker family have a lot of illnesses, kind of almost hypochondriac in a way. That's something I deal with in my first chapter. And then I'm also looking at kind of how the seaside became low in relation to class
Mm.
in the kind of Victorian era, how the working class became more mobile with things like increased transport links, invention of the railway, accessibility of the railway and how class dynamics kind of blurred and shifted at the seaside. So in a way, that's liminal. And then kind of looking at, in the third chapter, I want to even to be looking at kind of Dracula. I know he comes from Transylvania into the UK through Whitby, so I'm looking at Whitby. Just kind of how things...
Yes, I never thought of Dracula as a seaside novel.
But it is kind of, So this kind of idea of things not being kind of fixed at the seaside and things kind of looking at different health and leisure purposes, but this kind of ultimate blurring of boundaries between the two.
Yeah. I mean, is the seaside a place where it sort of has its own morality?
Definitely. I think a lot of things aren't kept as they should be. Like thinking, there's not as the social rules that weren't observed the same at the seaside, for example.
Interesting. Yeah. I hadn't really thought of that. How just taking the Austen books out, there's that.
It's the little threads.
Yeah. Doesn't somebody get injured in Lyme Regis?
Yes, in Persuasion Louise, I think it is jumps off the cob.
Yeah. I've been there a few times. I'm not falling off things.
No.
I've been to Lyme Regis. Very good bookshop.
I've not been. I'll have to go.
Oh yeah, nice. So, am I right in thinking you're going to Chawton?
I am.
For a fellowship?
Yes.
What's the deal with that?
Yeah, I am wearing my Chawton t-shirt. Not sponsored, by the way. I applied just on a whim. Didn't think I'd even be accepted, to be honest, because I applied to the Gladstones Fellowship, which is a week-long funded kind of research trip. Didn't get accepted onto that. And thought, you know what, I'll try for the Chawton one. It's a month-long research fellowship now, so I will be in residence in Chawton House in November for a full month. I'll be doing research using their quite fantastic library. They've got a very extensive Austen library, as you'd expect, but also a lot of 18th and 19th century women's writing.
Oh, wow.
So that'll be quite interesting to look at.
So do you actually stay in the building?
Yeah, they've got an Airbnb which you can rent out.
Okay.
But we'll be staying in that. There's two groups of three. There's 3 in August and 3 in November. I'm in the November cohort, and you stay in a little fully functioned kind of Airbnb with kitchen, bedrooms, etc. So I'll be staying there during my time, and then hopefully doing research. And then we've been asked to do something for the output of Chawton House, which I'd quite like to do a talk on persuasion, I'm thinking, which is one of my, I would say it's my favourite Austen novel. That often changes between Persuasion and Northanger, but they're my 2 favourites, about the seaside and kind of what's going on there. So I'm hoping that'll either be in person or online or both. So that's quite exciting to look forward to as well.
Yeah, and I guess hanging out with other scholars will be really useful too. Oh yeah, well we went there from school actually, because we did Emma at A level. Being on the south coast, it was a day trip thing.
I've never been to Chawton, so.
And her grave in Winchester Cathedral.
Yeah, they've opened the house that she died in now, apparently, in Winchester for the first time. They've I think it's because it's 250 years since she was born, so there's a lot of Austen things going on this year. Opening that in Winchester is one of them, so I'm hoping to maybe get there whilst I'm based in Chawton, because it's quite a 5-hour train journey down, so I'm hoping whilst I'm in the south I'll be able to do some things like that, maybe even get to Bath, we'll see.
Yeah. Oh, nice one. Yeah, you could do the whole tour, really.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's an anniversary year.
Yeah, it's 250 years since she was born this year. Which also I'm going to Global Jane Austen, which is a conference down in Southampton, especially for the 250 years. So that's next week. I'll be there for a few days, so that'll be quite exciting. Presenting there as well. So
when you're doing a PhD, it's not like just do the PhD and then when you finish, you start doing things like giving papers at conferences and writing for journals. You sort of do some of that along the way.
Try and integrate it. Edgehill does PhDs in a slightly weird way in which you have 3 vivas. Normally you just have 1 at the end. They do a registration, a progression, and then the final. I've done both my registration and my progression.
Sounds like the Hunger Games or something.
Oh, no. They say it's to get you used to doing the Bible, but it does kind of feel a bit scary at times as well.
Yeah.
Which I suppose when it comes to my final one, I kind of know what to expect in a way. But
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
one of the stipulations of my first 5 was to try and do conferencing outside of Edshell, because I did a few. We've got a few kind of department conferences here. So I spoke in Lancaster University in April at the British Association. No, it's not. The British, what is it called? Science and Literature.
Oh,
Something to do with
yeah.
that. I can't remember the exact name right now. On Jane Austen, of course, based on my first chapter. And then I've got the Global Jane Austen, which I'll be doing with Andy McInnes, who's my supervisor. Kind of snuck in through him, I think. And then I'll be giving a paper at Cambridge University as well in September about Northanger Abbey, which I haven't written yet, but will be excited to do. So it's interesting just kind of dip my toe into academia as well as doing the writing. There's a lot of kind of networking and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, so Jane Austen July is one of the big booktube events. It's been going a few years. Were you aware of that as a thing?
I know of it through Instagram.
Right, yeah.
I've got a book Instagram. I'll plug myself. You can find me at 19th Century M. I'm also on Twitter, but I don't really use that anymore, or X. And I'm also on Blue Star, so you can find me on all of those.
Okay, yeah, I'll put those in the description box.
Shameless plug. But yeah, I was aware of it through Instagram because I follow Katie, who's one of the organisers. And I've always seen the prompts, and I've always kind of wanted to do it, but never quite got around to it with various deadlines and things.
Well, yeah, quite.
So I'm hoping this year to complete it in full.
Really? You're going to do all the prompts?
I'm going to try my best to.
Okay, so do you want to give us a talk through what you're going to do then?
Definitely.
Prompt-wise.
I think the first prompt is one of Austen's main 6 novels, isn't it? So I think I'll be reading Northanger Abbey this year. As I say, Persuasion's also my co-favourite, but I've read Persuasion quite a lot lately, about 4 times I think, for this chapter that I've just finished. So I'm thinking, give that a break. Read Northanger Abbey, which I find really, really funny. I think it's one of Austen's most accessible novels. If you've not read Austen before, I think that's a great one to start with. It's quite short as well. It's quite funny. Yeah, I think that's a good one to start with, so that's what I'll be reading. If you haven't read any Austen's novels, maybe don't dive in first with Mansfield Park. It's also one of my favourites, but it's quite heavy. Maybe not the best place to start, although it is quite politically engaging and really interesting. I think it's one of her best novels, but maybe not the easiest to start with. The second prompt, I believe, is one outside of her main 6 novels. I've got 2 examples here, one which I'll be reading and one that I've read and enjoyed. So this is Lady Susan. It's very small, very tiny, very cute.
Right. My special product focus feature,
which is
nice book.
Really pretty, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's one of the special Penguin editions, like the smaller ones, or cloth bound, something like that. Which is told through letters about a lady named Lady Susan, who is divorced and is trying to get her daughter to marry wealthy. She's a little bit of like a Kris Jenner, kind of Kim Kardashian mother figure of the 19th century.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's quite funny. If you want to jump into one of an screen adaptation, the adaptation of Lady Susan is confusingly called Love and Friendship, which is also a short story by Jane Austen. I don't know why they've switched the titles, but the Love and Friendship film is basically a Lady Susan film. It's also quite funny, so I do recommend that one. But I think I'll be reading this, which I know you also spoke
that's
about.
the plan,
which is great because it's got Love and Friendship in it. It's got a few letters.
Is there extra stuff? Oh,
and then there's Frederick and Elfrida and Henry and Eliza, which apparently that Henry and Eliza is based on her brother.
Right. So this is the History of England book.
With a few extra goodies included.
I didn't know about the extra goodies. Great.
So that'll be quite fun.
So that's the Austen, by Austen, but not one of the big 6. Yeah.
And then I have lost the plot of which numbered they are. But
yeah, got it written down somewhere.
yeah, I made a list, but I can't remember which one's which.
Number 3,
Yeah.
read a non-fiction work about Jane Austen or her time.
Okay.
Well, that's like your job.
That is my job.
So you're going to give us something
I've got
that
a
normal
selection
people can
of
read.
2, but one of which I wrote for my undergraduate dissertation, which is why it's they're both very heavily tapped. And then one that I am due a reread of for my thesis, but I also read that I think for my master's dissertation. So the first one, which I really recommend, is being quite accessible to anyone who just is interested, is Jane Austen's Secret Radical by Helena. She's also published on Dickens, I think, as well. So if that's something also you're interested in, she's a very good writer. She writes about kind of the quote-unquote other side of Jane Austen. People kind of think of Austen as, the period dramas, the kind of like romance and a bit like kind of fluffy and things you can watch with your nan. Helena Kelly's book kind of shows a different side. The chapters...
it's bodice-burstingly brilliant.
Yeah, a bit racy. The chapters on Northanger Abbey and Persuasion I'm most familiar with because I did my dissertation on that for my undergrad. She talks about kind of the darker side. So like in Bath, there's kind of a lot of... like, for example, the front of buildings in Bath were finished and the back weren't because there's a lot of appearances in Bath, things like that. And talks about kind of the dangers of motherhood and marriage and kind of things like what Austen kind of hints at but never explicitly says, like Wickham running off with Lydia, kind of the threat of, there's dastardly men. So that one's a very good one. I also have brought with me Claudia Johnson's Jane Austen Culture and Cultures, also extremely tapped. Which
just a bit, looks like a festival.
Yeah, I bought my own copy of that because I was sick of getting all the way up here to.
You've worn out the library copy.
Yeah, I thought I'd get my own. But that's about kind of cultures of Jane Austen, like in popular culture and fandom. Starting with kind of as Austen in her time was never named. Her novels were just called By a Lady until after her death. So once her name was kind of revealed, there was a bit of a cult following kind of around the family. And then especially in World War I and World War II, there was a bit of a cult of Jane Austen there. Rudyard Kipling, who wrote The Jungle Book, has got a short story about people, or soldiers in the war who kind of really got into Jane Austen.
Really?
Which is kind of strange, but it's based on the truth. So if you're interested in kind of Jane Austen fandom and Jane Austen as a celebrity, I really recommend reading that one too.
Yeah. Oh, that looks really good. Right.
Yeah.
So we'll list them as well. So
definitely. And the one that you said you want to read, the Lucy Worsley one.
Yes,
that's brilliant.
Right. That's the one.
Jane Austen at Home.
Yes. Yeah.
She's recently published like a fancy title, a new fancy cover. For the 250-year anniversary. So I've got the old version, but there's a very pretty new one. So I also recommend that. I know you're going to read that. I'm not sure. Maybe.
Yeah.
I recommend it.
It's a busy month.
Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely a good one.
And I've got a lot of comments saying the Revolution book.
Yeah, I can't remember it.
Jane Austen, Napoleon, and Byron or somebody. Team together again for the first time, like the Avengers.
I know, Avengers of the 19th century.
So we'll see.
I've not read that one, but it does look quite good. So
Yeah. Okay, so number 4 is read a retelling of a Jane Austen book or work of historical fiction set in Jane Austen's time.
This is like also my niche because although I've not written on anything like this, I do love kind of retellings and adaptations. I'd quite like to do maybe a journal article or something in the future about that, so that's in the pipeline perhaps. Recommendations. I myself am thinking I'm going to read by Jessica Ball. I think it's called Miss Austen Investigates, and it's about kind of Jane Austen as literary detective. So I'm thinking of reading that. I think it's definitely there's two, maybe there's the third. I've got the first one, so I'm planning on reading that. But some recommendations.
Yeah, they sound fun.
Yeah, I think they're going to be quite good. I've had it on my Kindle for years. But I'm going on holiday like this month to very hot and sunny at the moment, Mallorca. So that might be one that I'm reading around the pool. So recommendations, I'm trying to think. A very recently published one just this year is The Unlikely Pursuit of Mary Bennet. I've just read that. It's my first 5-star book I've given this year.
Oh, right.
And it's a retelling of Pride and Prejudice in which poor Mr. Collins drops dead in literally the first page. So Charlotte Collins, is a widow and kind of isn't sure what she's going to do. Is she going to move back in with her parents, or she writes to her best friend Lizzie Bennet, famous of course now Mrs. Darcy in the book. Basically, to see what she can do. She's kind of at a quite precarious state, and Lizzie can't come because her son is ill. So instead, she sends her sister Mary Bennet. And if anyone's read Pride and Prejudice, you know that Mary's kind of a bit of she's often kind of laughed at. She's a bit of a stick in the mud. She kind of enthuses about Fordyce's sermons with Mr. Collins and plays the piano very badly. But in this version, I think it's a few years later, and it ultimately ends with a romance between the two. So it was really quite fun, and kind of obviously taken some 21st century liberties with that, but that's really fun. And also following Proudmont, that's just now ended. Might be one if anyone would like to read that.
Yeah,
that's quite fun.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about the sort of not anachronisms exactly? I mean, obviously, if people have aeroplanes or something, it's a bit ridiculous. But what the sort of modern attitudes, because sometimes they try not to have them and they just slip through, and other times they just throw them
go
in.
with it.
I mean,
I
suppose Bridgerton would be a kind of
definitely. There's been a lot of
let's just own it,
Lindz McLeod's book, she kind of writes it. To me, as I was reading it, it does feel very Jane Austen. Obviously, there's that kind of elements of like same-sex relationships as a transgender character, but I feel like it's handled. All the characters do react positively, so perhaps that might be something that someone might not necessarily call realistic. But I do feel like it's handled within the context quite well. Say something like Bridgerton, where it kind of doesn't claim to be period kind of appropriate. I think that's quite fun. But again, if you're looking for something kind of faithful to Austen, maybe might not be the most. There's a one that I read, I can't remember what it was called now, something like I can't remember the name. I think it was basically, anyway, it's someone who is of the modern day, magically goes back in time to Jane Austen's era, and then it's two women who fall in love, which I thought the premise was really good. I liked kind of, I'm not sure if it's about time travel. It felt a little bit like Outlander. But what made me put it down was that the author was American and kept referring to bedside tables in the 19th century as nightstands. And that took me out of it so much that I couldn't get past that.
There is things like I often think I could hire myself out as an English person, when people call porches stoops as one, so you just think,
I just was like, no, check it out there for me a little bit.
Oh dear, right, okay. Then read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen, published between 1775 and 1817. That's, to me, that felt like quite a difficult one.
So this is my recommendation. It's A Woman of Colour, where you can zoom that into the camera. It's written by an anonymous, we don't know who wrote it, an anonymous person. And it's about a mixed race, the heroine's mixed race, the daughter of a plantation owner, and she comes to England to kind of get a fortune. She has to marry a person, I think it's a cousin, that her father stipulates in order to get her money, and she doesn't kind of want to do that, she just wants the money for herself. Those who have read Sanditon or know of Sanditon or have seen the adaptation of Sanditon, Miss Lamb is a character in that who is also a mixed race heiress. This was written in published in 1808. So whether Austen may have read it and been inspired by that, we can't say, but perhaps. It's a really interesting one. And I was trying to think of anything else I could think of, and I didn't even twig at first, but the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was published in 1818, so it's out by just a year. Whether someone wants to take the liberty of going, well, it's probably written in 1817, so it might be okay. You often wouldn't put kind of Austen and Frankenstein together in like one group, but given they are published quite just a year after Austen's death, you could maybe sneak that in. I'm not sure that's within the rules or not, but I enjoy Frankenstein.
I know people are.
Yeah, so that might be one. I know you spoke about doing the prelude, which I taught over at a different university. I just taught on the romantic module for a term over there, and I had to teach the prelude. I like Wordsworth, but I found it a bit heavy, so I wouldn't myself rush to that.
But then you've got a direct screen adaptation of a Jane Austen book. Well, there's plenty of them.
There's loads, yeah.
Probably new ones coming along as well with the anniversary year, giving it some extra.
Yeah, I think a new Sense and Sensibility is being announced with Daisy Edgar Jones of I don't know what she's in. Possibly maybe she's in Normal People. I can't remember. She's quite famous, Daisy Edgar Jones.
Right.
I'm not sure I've seen anything she's in, but she's going to be in the new Sense and Sensibility, which is I think in development, but obviously can't watch that yet. There are adaptations. I love the Northanger Abbey 2007. I'm a big Northanger Abbey fan, as I've established. I think it's really funny. It's Andrew Davies, who produced the 1995 Pride and Prejudice with the iconic wet shirt scene in Mr. Darcy. He equally does sex up Northanger Abbey slightly. There's kind of a fun scene where Catherine's reading these gothic novels, kind of where, you know, monks are running off with people, and there's all kind of escapades going on, and she has some kind of saucy dreams, which my Cambridge presentation is going to be on, titled Jane Austen's Wet Dream, because I thought it quite funny. Everyone else is quite serious, and then I've just thrown this slightly unserious one in. I also like I don't think you can go wrong with 2005 Pride and Prejudice either, which is recently on BBC iPlayer, I think, so that's available at the moment.
That's the
Keira Knightley one.
Yeah,
that's quite good. The 2022 Persuasion, if you want to give that a whirl, there's a weird octopus dream in it. I don't quite know what that's about. It's also turned a bit Fleabag, where she keeps looking at the camera.
Yeah, some people find that one a bridge too far.
It's not my favourite. The guy who plays Wentworth as well is quite a bit drippy, so I don't think he's my favourite choice to play Wentworth. But if you fancy something a bit more exciting, maybe go for that one.
Okay, yeah. A modern screen adaptation or retelling of a Jane Austen book. Again, there's plenty of them.
My favourites are Bride and Prejudice, which is like a Bollywood adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. I think that's really fun. I watched that a few years ago. That's a fun one. Trying to think what else is good. Emma, Clueless is based on Emma. That's quite fun.
I really want to see that. Somehow I haven't seen it.
I enjoyed that. I think I might watch Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which is also... The book's quite good because it's based on Austen's text just with added zombies. The film kind of goes a little bit off the walls, of course, with the Bennet sisters being zombie killers. But I do think that's quite a fun one if you're into, you know, kind of horror as well. I'm trying to think.
Do the zombies take the place of the sort of travelling vagabond people who are like on the margins?
There is a bit of kind of, there's kind of, I think Catherine de Bourgh, like the great lady, is kind of like this mega mind of like zombie killing, and she kind of, you know, becomes even more scary, not only in kind of being the kind of foils between Elizabeth and Darcy, but also kind of has these expert zombie. And I think the ball at Meryton is kind of interrupted by zombies, so all that's it's a bit strange. One on Netflix at the moment called From Prada to Nada, which is a Sense and Sensibility adaptation set in America, like kind of Latin American kind of influences. That's quite fun. And I think that even though obviously it doesn't claim to be sensibility, it feels the most accurate to the novel with a modern spin on it. So that's quite a fun one actually. They all seem to be quite early 2000s as well, which is a rom-com era of, quite fun films, yeah.
Oh well, good times. Right, that's about it for my questions and prompts, I think. So, anything else? What would you say to someone who's, I mean, you touched on this, but someone who's never read Jane Austen and thinks it's just people coming in and out of rooms?
Yeah, chatting and marrying.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it is, but it's just but is there a way in for somebody who would normally be reading not lit fic particularly, but would be reading contemporary fiction or genre fiction?
I think start with the adaptations, start with the films of the series. That's a good way, and that's how I certainly started. You become kind of familiar with the plot, and then if you do go on then to read the books, you kind of got an understanding of what's going on, because obviously some of the language is a bit old-fashioned and sometimes it meanders off into side plots that the adaptations don't always kind of go down that route, but you'll have a good gist of what the main plot is. I'd start with something like Northanger Abbey. Pride and Prejudice is always a good one to start with, I think, because it's the most famous.
Yeah, I think it's the sort of favourite of favourites.
Don't be afraid of engaging with the political elements, because as well as Austen she writes kind of, let's call them romance in inverted commas. She engaged a lot with satire. There's quite a lot of humour being poked fun at people. There's a criticism of the patriarchy and of society. In Mansfield Park, she engages with a lot of debates around slavery and emancipation. Mansfield Park itself is a nod to Lord Mansfield, who was the judge who, I believe, gave the ruling to kind of outlaw slavery in England. So there's a lot of kind of political kind of nuts going on there. I think Jane Austen Rise of a Genius, which has just been on telly, 3-parter, helps you kind of with that political and social element as well. So, but yeah, definitely give it a few reads as well. If you kind of don't be disheartened if you're finding it troubling and a bit stuck, keep going. I think it took me about 3 reads of persuasion kind of to get my head around it all, and every time I read it I find something else new that I didn't kind of notice, the first time.
Yeah, because in terms of plot, it's not like you keep seeing different elements of the story exactly,
little
but like
bits
you say,
and
it's
bobs that kind of jump out. Yeah, definitely. And if you read Austen in school and hated it, or at uni and hated it, maybe try it again. I taught it to a load of second-year undergrads, and I don't think many of them quite enjoyed it as much as me. I think I got a bit too excited. I was sat on the table and they all looked at me a bit horrified, because I'm like, yeah, Jane Austen, and they're all like, oh, it is people going to other people's houses. I'm like, yeah, but just give it a go. Maybe you'll enjoy it.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, maybe the combination of the anniversary year and the Jane Austen July as well, things like that might sort of get a few more people to give her a go. Okay, well, I think that's it then. So thanks, Emma, for giving us your time. And I'll be back soon with something else.